Before there was darkness, there was a light so brilliant it outshone every star. Before there was a villain, there was a hero, the most perfect being ever created, second only to God himself. His name was Lucifer, the light bringer, the morning star, a masterpiece of divine art. So, how did this radiant angel, the very seal of perfection, become the ultimate symbol of evil? This is not the story of a monster with horns and a pitchfork. This is the story of a fall from unimaginable glory, a story of pride, betrayal, and a choice that scarred creation forever. This is the complete story of Lucifer, like you've never seen it before. Let's journey back to a time before time itself, before the universe as we know it existed, before the first star was hung in the cosmos, and long before humanity ever took its first breath. Imagine a realm of pure light, of absolute harmony and infinite goodness. This was heaven, a place of perfect order, where every being radiated a brilliant light, their existence a song of deep love and reverence for their Creator, their Father. In this divine kingdom, every angel had a purpose, a unique role within a grand celestial structure. At the highest levels, the seraphim burned like living flames, their entire being an expression of pure, unending love, their voices constantly singing praise. Below them were the cherubim, the mighty guardians of divine wisdom, protectors of cosmic secrets, a living shield against any hint of impurity. Closer to the yet-to-be-created world were the archangels, like the great warrior Michael and the messenger Gabriel, figures of immense power who carried out God's most critical commands. And then there were the angels, the countless guardians who would one day watch over human souls. It was a perfect system, a symphony of purpose and light. But within this breathtaking perfection, God chose to create something truly extraordinary. He wanted to sculpt a masterpiece. From the depths of his infinite love and wisdom, he brought forth his very first creation, a being so magnificent, so powerful, and so beautiful that all of heaven stood in awe. His name was Lucifer, the morning star, the light bringer. The scriptures describe him as the very seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Think about that for a moment. He was not just another angel. He was God's magnum opus, the first being sculpted by the divine hand. God poured his creative delight into him, granting Lucifer a status and power unlike any other angel. His intelligence was staggering, second only to God's own mind. His honor and dignity were unmatched in the celestial court. When Lucifer walked among the other angels, everyone admired him. His charisma was magnetic, his presence inspiring a natural respect and devotion. He was anointed as a guardian cherub, placing him in one of the highest orders, tasked with protecting the sanctity of God's holy mountain. He walked among the fiery stones, a place of immense power and purity. Lucifer was not just beautiful on the outside. He was the leader that other angels instinctively followed. He organized and directed the heavenly choirs, and his voice, filled with passion and fervor, was like a guiding flame in their songs of praise to the Creator. Even the great archangels, warriors, and messengers of immense stature looked upon Lucifer's wisdom with admiration. He was, in every sense, the pinnacle of creation. God had crafted something flawless, a being who was blameless in all his ways from the day he was created. There was no trace of evil, no hint of darkness, no shadow of sin within him. He was a pure reflection of divine glory. And here lies the great mystery, the question that sits at the heart of this entire story. God did not create a monster. He created a masterpiece. He gave Lucifer the greatest gifts: intelligence, beauty, power, and the freedom to use them. So what changed? How could a being crafted from pure light, the very symbol of heavenly perfection, become the source of all suffering and the prince of darkness? The answer was not a flaw in his design. The answer was a choice, a single, fleeting thought, born in the heart of perfection, that would grow to shatter heaven and scar eternity. The journey from glory to curse began not with a roar, but with a whisper of pride, growing silently in the heart of God's most beloved creation. At first, it was a spark so faint, it was barely perceptible, a fleeting thought that crossed the vast expanse of Lucifer's brilliant mind as he led the heavenly choirs in praise. He looked at the sea of adoring faces turned towards him, and a question, silent and subtle, began to form. What if my light could shine brighter? What if my glory did not always need to serve another's? These were small, almost invisible questions, but like seeds planted in the fertile ground of his perfect intellect, they took root in the silence of his own thoughts. Away from the songs of worship, he began to see himself differently. He started to admire the reflection of his own splendor. Slowly, the focus of his magnificent mind began to shift. He was seduced by the very light God had placed within him, forgetting that this light was a reflection of divine love, not a source of his own. The Bible tells us precisely how his fall began. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. The very gifts that made him extraordinary became the instruments of his downfall. The beauty that all of heaven admired turned into the source of his ruin. The wisdom that inspired countless angels became the weapon of his own sin. Heaven, in its perfect harmony, continued its song, but something in Lucifer grew more distant with each passing day. The other angels, perceptive beings of light, began to notice a change. He became more introspective, more enigmatic. His usual radiance seemed to flicker with a restless energy. The great messenger, Gabriel, approached him one day, his own light soft with concern. "Lucifer, brother," he said, "what burden weighs on your heart? Your light seems troubled." Lucifer turned his gaze upon him, a gaze that once held warmth and wisdom, but now contained a cool detachment. He offered a serene smile that did not reach his eyes. "There are things, dear Gabriel," he replied, "that even we cannot fully understand." Gabriel felt a chill, a deep sense of unease, but Lucifer turned away, avoiding any further words that might reveal the storm that was gathering within him. Day by day, the change became more pronounced. Lucifer began to neglect his sacred duties. His voice, once the proud leader of the heavenly choir, often fell silent during the hymns of praise. The other angels felt his absence profoundly, like a vibrant star suddenly missing from the celestial firmament. In the great gatherings where he once stood at the forefront, he now stood in the back, his gaze fixed upward not with adoration, but with a complex mixture of pride and resentment. Now, it is crucial to understand that heaven had clear rules but no chains. God, in his infinite love, had granted every angel the gift of free will. It was the ultimate expression of trust. They had the freedom to love and to serve, which inherently meant they also possessed the freedom to choose otherwise. As Lucifer wrestled internally between his light and his growing shadow, the angels around him sensed the tension of his choice. Some, still dazzled by his greatness and charisma, began to listen to his quiet words with new ears. They started to follow him silently, drawn to his powerful light, wondering if it could lead them to a new, undiscovered destiny. One of the cherubim, noticing his profound change, approached him after a gathering. "Lucifer," the angel asked gently, "do you no longer find joy in singing praise to the Father?" Lucifer looked at him, and for the first time, a cold smile touched his lips. "I have found other pursuits," he answered, his voice smooth and confident. "Perhaps there is something more, something beyond what we have always known." And in that moment, the morning star made his decision. The quiet spark of pride within him erupted into a full-blown flame. The flame became a fire of raw ambition. In his heart, a new anthem began to play, one he composed himself. He said to himself, "I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High." That night, his radiance changed forever. It was no longer the warm, guiding light of praise. It was the cold, burning blaze of ambition. And paradise, so perfect, so full of peace, felt the first terrifying tremor of rebellion. God knew. Of course, he knew. In his infinite wisdom, he saw the seeds of pride germinating in the heart of his most beautiful creation. His sadness was profound, an ancient and patient sorrow. It was the pain of a father watching his beloved son begin to stray. He called Lucifer to him, alone, amid the sacred silence of the highest heaven. His voice was not thunderous with anger, but deep and gentle like a flowing river, filled with love and patience. "Lucifer, my son, the seal of perfection," God began, his words resonating with a gentle warmth. "I sense your thoughts are straying from me. In your heart, Ideas are growing that separate you from the eternal. Lucifer, still cloaked in his radiant glow, looked at his creator. He wasn't defiant yet, not openly. He was still the master of serene composure. "Father," he replied, his voice a model of reason, "did you not create me to understand and explore? There is nothing I desire more than to comprehend the full depth of your work. Do you think that is wrong?" God's heart, immense and patient, understood the delicate fragility of the freedom he had bestowed. He knew Lucifer wasn't lying. His desire to understand was genuine, but it was becoming dangerously. "Lucifer," God continued gently, "your desire to understand is noble, but your thoughts are turning inward. You have been seduced by the light I placed within you, forgetting it is a reflection of my love, not a source of your own." Lucifer lowered his gaze, but inside him a fire of pride and misunderstanding began to burn, a sting of indignation. He felt he was being questioned, his loyalty unfairly doubted. "My lord," he said, "I have wanted nothing that is not yours. My light is the gift you gave me. How could I possibly turn away from you when I was made by your own will?" God looked at him with eyes of infinite tenderness. He saw that Lucifer was beginning to see his own glory as an end in itself. He had not yet sinned, not in action, but his love was cooling, replaced by a growing fascination with his own perfection. Full of mercy, God extended his hand. "Son, remember where all light comes from. Do not let your heart be shrouded in shadows. If you turn back to me, your splendor will grow in truth, and together we will be greater than any solitary thought." But instead of feeling peace, Lucifer felt another sting to his pride, a discomfort he could barely comprehend. Didn't God trust his ability to remain faithful? Why so many warnings? He bowed with perfect grace, but as he withdrew, an invisible chasm was widening between him and his creator. He believed he could handle this on his own. He was strong enough, wise enough, to explore these new thoughts without falling. He was wrong. As the days passed, his desire to explore his own greatness absorbed him completely. He no longer paused to contemplate God with the same pure devotion. The angels still admired him, his voice could still lead the choirs when he chose, but his heart was now divided. Once more, God called to him. The divine voice was filled with a deeper sorrow now. "Lucifer, I have seen the path you are taking, and it pains me to see you like this. Your light is turning to shadow. There is still time, my son. If you return, the love within you will bloom anew." But this time, Lucifer refused to listen. His heart had hardened, seeking only self-satisfaction and personal glory. He began to justify his thoughts, to build an internal argument for his ambition. "Don't I deserve more? Am I not the one who shines most brightly? In his infinite patience, God let him go. He had given all the love and mercy possible. The choice now had to be Lucifer's. "I will not turn away from you," God said in a final, heartbreaking warning. "But you are free to choose." God knew a great test was coming, a revelation that would challenge every celestial being. He had delayed it, wanting to give Lucifer every chance to strengthen himself in humility, to anchor his heart in loyalty. He had spoken to him with fatherly love, warning him that a great storm was approaching. Lucifer had even knelt before God, sincerely promising to try to remain loyal. His words were not lies. A part of him, a deep part of his being, still burned with a genuine desire to serve. But in a dark corner of his mind, the seed of pride was now a thriving weed, choking out the light, and the time for warnings was coming to an end. All of heaven was about to be tested, and Lucifer, the morning star, was standing right at the edge of the abyss. The time for warnings was over. God, in his infinite patience, had given Lucifer every opportunity to turn back from the precipice. But the waiting had to end. The divine plan was not just for Lucifer. It concerned all of creation, and the moment of revelation could no longer be postponed. A palpable tension filled the air of heaven, a deep and solemn expectation that settled over every angel, from the mightiest seraphim to the humblest guardian. Something monumental was about to happen. On that fateful day, God gathered his heavenly hosts. Every angel, great and small, assembled in a congregation so vast and brilliant. It illuminated the firmament like a billion suns. A profound silence fell, a hush so deep that all of heaven seemed to hold its breath. the very fabric of the cosmos opened, and God's presence shone with a majesty that was both terrifying and beautiful. Then, like soft thunder rolling through the expanse, his voice filled the entire cosmos. "I will create a material universe," the Creator announced. The angels watched, spellbound, as a vision unfolded before them. "A place where life will flourish, a place that will reflect my love and glory in a new way." Before their very eyes, the vision took shape. They saw stars being born, galaxies swirling in a perfect cosmic dance, and planets spinning in flawless orbits. On one of these worlds, a beautiful blue and green jewel named Earth, life would flourish in its greatest splendor. A wave of joy and fascination swept through the angelic ranks. They had never imagined such a thing. It was a dream of creation, unfolding in real time, and their hearts swelled with awe at the Creator's boundless imagination. But God was not finished. His voice continued, and his next words carried a mystery that would change everything. "I will not only create this universe," he declared. "On that world, I will create beings in my own image and likeness. They will be called humans. They will be of flesh and of spirit, a blend of heaven and earth." The angels listened, intrigued by this strange new concept. Beings made of dust, yet bearing the divine image. It was a paradox, a fusion of the mortal and the immortal, that was utterly new. But the greatest revelation was yet to come, and more. God's voice resonated with ultimate love. "In that same place, I myself will become flesh. The second person of the Trinity, my Son, will take human form. His name will be Jesus Christ, and in that humanity you shall worship me." The silence in heaven became overwhelming, absolute. The angels struggled to comprehend the depth of this mystery. God, the eternal, the all-powerful, the source of all that is, was asking them to worship him in the form of a human, to bend their knee not just to the blinding majesty of the divine, but to a fragile, humble, human face. It was an act of love so profound, so radical, so self-emptying, that it defied all logic. Then, the silence broke. A roar of jubilation and wonder erupted from the loyal angels. They acclaimed the Creator, feeling incredibly privileged to witness such a mystery. The idea that the light of light would become flesh was an act so wonderful, so sublime, that they could not contain their joy. It was God's plan in its most unexpected and beautiful form, a display of the deepest, most incomprehensible love. But the revelation was not complete. God also revealed that this new creation, humanity, would eventually become corrupted by their own free will, and that He, in the form of Jesus Christ, would sacrifice himself for them through a brutal crucifixion to redeem them. Yet among the cheering hosts, one of the brightest remained perfectly still. Lucifer did not move. He did not speak. He did not cheer. He watched the scene unfold with a distant, cold expression, as if the radiant light of joy surrounding him could not penetrate the armor of his thoughts. His gaze was like a dark, bottomless well, and his beautiful face reflected the violent storm that was now raging within his heart. For him, this was not a revelation of love. It was an insult. In that single, cataclysmic moment, everything inside Lucifer shattered. The idea of bowing to a human form, of worshipping God in the humility of mortal flesh, was utterly incomprehensible. It was an absurdity. Why, the question screamed in his mind. Why would perfection itself need to lower itself to something so base? Why are we, beings of pure light, being asked to worship a being of flesh and dust? He had just heard that these new creatures, humans, would not only be weak, but would also end up corrupting themselves. And knowing this, God would still sacrifice himself for them. The vision of the crucifixion was a horror to Lucifer, a spectacle of weakness and suffering that made him recoil. These finite, ungrateful beings would not only rebel against their Creator, they would go so far as to kill him, and God would let them. It was a plan that, in Lucifer's mind, was not just flawed, it was insane. Could anything be more absurd? He observed God's grand plan with a mixture of disbelief and growing disdain. The mystery of the Incarnation, the revelation that the Creator he had served and admired would take on the form of a fragile human named Jesus Christ, had unleashed a hurricane within him, and from that storm, a single, burning question emerged, dripping with poison and pride. Why not me? For eons, he had been the most beautiful, the most powerful, the closest to the throne. He was the Creator's masterpiece. Why hadn't he been chosen for this great honor, this hypostatic union of the divine and the created? He felt his light, his splendor, his unmatched wisdom made him worthy of something greater, something more glorious. But instead of elevating him further, God had chosen to lower himself, to pour out his divinity into a vessel of clay. From this single, selfish thought, a bitter resentment was born. It coiled around his heart like a venomous serpent, suffocating every last trace of the love and reverence he had once held for his Father. He was no longer just questioning, he was judging. He was condemning the plan of God as a catastrophic mistake. And so, the decisive moment arrived. God was there, his presence filling heaven, surrounded by the multitude of adoring angels. One by one, Lucifer's brothers knelt in worship, their hearts filled with love as they accepted the beautiful, terrible revelation of the Incarnation. But Lucifer remained standing. His body was rigid, his gaze fixed not on God's face, but on the empty space of the throne beside him. His heart was now a cold, hard stone filled with silent hatred. Slowly, his perfect lips parted, and in a tone devoid of all emotion, a voice that was chillingly calm, he uttered a single word, a word that resonated like a crack of thunder in the sacred silence of heaven. God looked at him, his gaze a mixture of profound sadness and infinite love. But Lucifer felt nothing but disdain. He was beyond the reach of that love now. He took a deep breath, and he repeated the word, this time with a force that shook the very angels standing near him. No. His voice rose, cold and defiant, like that of a king pronouncing a final, unshakable judgment. The angels present shuddered, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. How could he? How could the morning star, the seal of perfection, the most beautiful of all angels, openly defy the Creator himself? Lucifer then turned his burning gaze away from the throne and toward the stunned multitude of his fellow angels, with a terrifying calm, a composure that was more frightening than any rage. He began to address them. Don't you realize this is a mistake? He asked, his voice now charged with a dark, persuasive wisdom that filled the celestial space. Can't you see that what God asks of us is an absurdity? He was no longer just defying God. He was starting a revolution. He asks us to worship an inferior form, Lucifer declared, each word crafted with intelligence and designed to persuade, to bend our knees before mortal flesh. This is not glory. This is humiliation. The words, so logical on the surface, so full of wounded pride, embedded themselves in the hearts of some angels. They began to sow the first seeds of doubt, disturbing the perfect peace that had once filled them. The rebellion had begun. He asks the unacceptable of us, Lucifer continued, his voice resonating with an icy passion that was both captivating and terrifying. We are not the ones who must accept this nonsense. It is God who has failed, who has taken a wrong path. Why should we bow to something beneath us? We, who are made of pure, eternal light, should occupy a higher place, not lower ourselves to worship weakness and dust. The angels listened, bewildered. His words seemed so logical, so full of reason. His argument was a masterful blend of truth and distortion. He was right. They were beings of immense power and light. Was it truly fitting for them to kneel before a lesser creation? In some, the seed of rebellion began to germinate, watered by his compelling charisma. Lucifer, with the powerful presence that had always been his gift, looked at them one by one, his face reflecting a cold, unshakable determination. Lucifer, first among angels, had finally and irrevocably fallen. The whispers began. Whispers of rebellion, whispers of reason, echoing in the hearts of those most dazzled by Lucifer's light. His speech had a seductive logic, a convincing force that penetrated their minds like a gentle, sweet poison. Is God asking the impossible of us? Is it fair that we must bow before a human form, before something so low? These were thoughts that some had barely dared to formulate, and yet here they were, growing like shadows in their souls of light. As Lucifer spoke, his words flowed with the authority and confidence he had always possessed. It was impossible not to listen. His speech was firm, direct, and every phrase resonated with a powerful blend of wisdom and defiance. But suddenly, in the midst of his persuasive discourse, another voice rose. It was not a voice of complex argument or dark charisma. It was a cry, simple and pure, but it rose with a force that shook the entire heavens. A cry overflowing with unwavering conviction and profound humility. Who is like God? The voice belonged to Michael, not a mighty seraph, not a wise cherub, but a small archangel, a being of lesser rank than Lucifer, but one whose purity shone with an incomparable, unblemished strength. His exclamation, in Hebrew Michael, which is the very meaning of his name, pierced through the assembled angels like a sword of pure light. In just 3 words, Michael had shattered all of Lucifer's intricate arguments. He had pointed out the single, fundamental flaw in his entire rebellion. Who is like God? It was a cry of absolute truth, a cry of humility, a cry of recognition that no one, not even the glorious morning star, could ever rival the Creator. The angels trembled. Michael's words, so simple and direct, awakened something deep within them. They were reminded of who they were, where they came from, and to whom they owed their very existence. Lucifer, upon hearing that cry, whirled around to face Michael. His gaze was filled with an icy fury, but also with shock. No one, until that moment, had ever dared to challenge him so openly, so directly. Michael stepped towards him, small in physical comparison, but immense in courage. "You are arrogant," he said, and his words were not a shout, but they carried the weight of thunder. His voice, though calm, was charged with a conviction that pierced Lucifer like an arrow. "Your light, Lucifer, has become a shadow trying to eclipse the Creator. Can't you see? You have placed yourself above God." Lucifer felt a deep, agonizing pain in his core, a wound that Michael had just torn open with those words. His pride, his ambition, all of it had been exposed, laid bare for all of heaven to see. He was publicly shamed and humiliated. In that instant, a tidal wave of rage and shame flooded him, crashing against his heart. With a look of pure contempt, he tried to stand firm before Michael, but something in those words burned him from within. "You understand?" "Nothing," Lucifer retorted, his voice strained as he tried to maintain his dignity. "Are you so blind that you cannot see the humiliation we are being asked to endure? I, who was first in his glory, cannot kneel before something so inferior." Michael looked at him, his expression serene yet unyielding. "You don't understand love, Lucifer," he replied, his quiet voice holding the force of 1,000 storms. "This is not about humiliation. It is about love. God becomes flesh for us, and you reject him because you cannot bear to be lesser than anything. You have forgotten your place. You have forgotten that all you are is a reflection of his glory. It is not God who lowers himself. It is your pride that elevates you beyond your own being." Lucifer felt he couldn't bear it another second. It was as if Michael was holding up a perfect mirror, and the reflection he saw was not of a glorious, misunderstood hero, but of a twisted shadow, consumed by resentment and pride. He couldn't withstand the weight of that truth, of that simple, powerful love Michael defended so fiercely. Without another word, he turned away, distancing himself from Michael and all who watched. He retreated, his back straight and proud, but inside, an uncontainable fire of pure rage and hatred was burning, a hatred born from his wounded pride. He would never forgive Michael for this. He would never forgive God. The war was about to begin. Alone, Lucifer wept, but these were not tears of sorrow or regret. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. A white-hot hatred born from the depths of his wounded pride now consumed him entirely. How dare he? The thought screamed through his mind again and again. How could Michael, that lesser being, challenge me, the brightest of all? Yet, deep within the inferno of his anger, a faint, agonizing voice whispered the truth. Michael was right, and that truth was the cruelest torture of all. The public humiliation had solidified his resolve. There was no turning back now. His retreat from Michael was not an act of surrender. It was a strategic withdrawal. He now knew that open debate in front of the loyal Messiahs was a losing battle against the simple, powerful truth of humility. He needed a different approach. He needed to build an army. He began to move through the celestial realms, no longer as a leader of praise, but as a quiet and persuasive revolutionary. He sought out those angels who had looked uncertain during his confrontation with Michael, those whose light flickered with doubt. He didn't approach them with anger or open calls for war. His method was far more insidious, far more intelligent. He used his immense charisma and wisdom, now twisted to serve his dark purpose. He would find a group of angels gathered in quiet contemplation and join them. "Can't you see that God asks the impossible of us?" he would whisper, his voice low but full of a captivating conviction. "He asks us to renounce who we are, to kneel before an inferior form made of clay." He would pause, letting the poisonous idea take root. Think of it. Are we supposed to worship a crucified God? We, glorious and powerful beings, must kneel before that broken, bloodied body, covered in wounds and suffering beyond measure. His arguments were brilliant in their deceptive logic. He spoke to their sense of dignity, their awareness of their own greatness. And for many, it worked. More and more angels began to murmur amongst themselves, "Lucifer is right. God cannot ask us to do something that defies all logic and reason." A dangerous question began to spread like a contagion. What if God is not truly God? What if he is just a very powerful angel, a greater Lucifer? What if this plan is not divine, but a mistake? The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing into a forest of rebellion. Lucifer's gaze, intense and burning, bored into his brothers, and many felt a powerful, undeniable truth in his words. He never spoke of hatred or violence. He spoke of dignity. He spoke of preserving the greatness of their existence. He framed rebellion as self-respect. He knew exactly how to reach their hearts. He spoke of freedom, of independence, of becoming something more than what they had always been. He promised them a new kind of heaven, a meritocracy where they wouldn't have to bow to anyone, a place where their own individual talents and light would be the highest authority, not subordinate to a God who would debase himself. "God has given us free will," he declared in these secret gatherings. "So why not exercise it to its fullest extent? Why not be who we truly are, without limitation?" With each gathering, his army grew, and it is a tragic testament to his power that it wasn't the lesser angels who flocked to his banner. It was the best and the brightest, the most beautiful, the wisest, the angels in whom God had invested the greatest power and beauty. Lucifer chose them carefully, seeking out those who, like him, yearned for something more, those whose own perfection had become a source of pride. Heaven's most radiant beings, once the crown jewels of creation, began to form the ranks of the rebel army. They were creatures of such breathtaking perfection that they outshone all other light, and now that brilliant light was beginning to darken with the shadows of ambition. The stage was being set for a conflict that would tear the fabric of paradise apart. At one of these clandestine meetings, held in a shadowed corner of the firmament, where the light of God's throne seemed distant, Lucifer stood before his newly amassed followers. His presence was commanding, his dark splendor more captivating than ever. "We are the future," he proclaimed, his voice echoing not with the warmth of praise, but with the sharp crackle of thunder. "We are the light that refuses to kneel. We will not allow our essence to be dimmed beneath the shadow of an inferior form." He paused, his burning gaze sweeping across the faces of the magnificent beings before him. He saw their strength, their beauty, their power, and he saw it all as his own. "If God will not give us the place we deserve," he declared, his voice rising with fervor, "then we will take it ourselves." His words ignited the pride in their hearts. Every angel present felt a tremor in their being, a thrill of forbidden power. He spoke with a certainty that made them question everything they had ever known, every hymn they had ever sung. Under his charismatic leadership, Lucifer's army took shape. Each of his followers was like a falling star, a breathtaking beauty transformed into a weapon of rebellion. The angels who had once been the most loyal, the most respected, and the most beloved, now rose up as the first army in the history of heaven. In their hearts burned ambition, pride, and the seductive promise of a freedom that, deep down, was nothing more than a chain forged by their own vanity. The harmony of heaven was broken. The perfect symphony was now a discordant clash of wills. The firmament, once filled with unending peace, now trembled with the silent, growing echoes of war. But not all were swayed. In another corner of heaven, a different kind of army was gathering. It was smaller, less ostentatious, but its light was pure and unwavering. Michael, the small archangel who had fearlessly defied Lucifer, rose once more. He did not need charisma or complex arguments. He held his sword of light high, and he cried out the only words that mattered. "Who is like God?" That exclamation, simple yet powerful, was a rallying cry for the faithful. It awakened those who were wavering, reminding them of the ultimate truth that Lucifer's pride sought to obscure. Michael, with a strength born of unmatched humility, stood ready to defend the Creator's honor. He looked at Lucifer's growing forces, a dazzling array of the most powerful beings in creation, and he knew his own forces were vastly outmatched in number and raw power. He knew that Lucifer's followers were some of the most formidable warriors and strategists in heaven, but he never wavered. His faith was his shield. His loyalty was his weapon. Thus, the lines were drawn. The great schism was complete. On one side, Lucifer, the morning star, his light transformed into a burning ambition that would forever mark the history of creation. His army was a breathtaking sight, an assembly of celestial power and beauty, now united in a cause of supreme arrogance. On the other side, Michael, his strength rooted in his absolute devotion to God. His army was composed of angels of all ranks who had chosen love over pride, humility over glory. The first battle was about to be fought, a war between brothers. With each drawn sword of light, with each determined gaze, the heavens shattered, and the universe held its breath. The final, terrible clash was inevitable. The war for heaven had begun.
The battle erupted with a fury that shook the very foundations of heaven. It was not a war of steel and blood, but something far more fundamental. A war of will, of light against shadow. On one side stood the rebel army led by Lucifer. His splendor was now a terrifying cloak of shadows, his once pure light twisted into a burning, dark energy. His followers, the fallen third of heaven's host, fought with the desperate fury of those who had everything to lose, their beauty now a terrible and fearsome mask. Facing them were the faithful angels, led by the humble and resolute Michael. He was no longer just a small archangel. He was the embodiment of divine justice, his iron strength forged in unshakable faith and overflowing with courage. His army, though outnumbered, fought with a quiet, unyielding determination, their every move guided by love and loyalty to their Creator. Heaven, once a realm of perfect peace and harmony, became a dazzling, chaotic battlefield. The armies clashed like waves of fire and thunder. Each blow, each crossing of light created brilliant flashes that lit up the heavens like a storm of falling stars in a fierce cosmic dance. The sound was not of clashing metal, but of warring wills, a symphony of chaos that reverberated through all of creation. The fallen angels, once the most powerful and beautiful beings to grace the sky, fought with a seemingly inexhaustible fury. Their pride gave them a terrible strength, but the faithful angels battled with a different kind of power. They were enveloped in a divine grace, a protection that reminded them they were not alone. The Creator was with them, and that presence gave them a strength that surpassed any measure of individual force. Michael, the lowest-ranking archangel, advanced at the forefront of his brothers. Again and again, his voice rang out across the battlefield, a clear, unwavering cry that cut through the chaos and struck fear into the hearts of the rebels. Who is like God? His strength lay not in his rank or his splendor, but in the absolute purity of his faith. He fought, not for his own glory or out of pride, but because he knew with every fiber of his being that goodness, light, and truth were on his side. And in that certainty, his strength seemed to multiply tenfold. Lucifer, enraged by this display of humble power, tried to push Michael back. He rose on his great wings, exhaling a shadow that seemed to absorb the light around him, a darkness that sought to envelop and demoralize all who looked upon it. I was the first, he roared, his voice filled with the anguish of his wounded pride. I am the true light. But his words were empty now, hollow, a dark echo of the glory he had willingly abandoned. His light was a distorted shadow, and his power, though formidable, could not eclipse the simple, burning truth that Michael held like a pure flame. The battle was fierce, and the heavens themselves felt wounded. The angels who were not fighting watched in awe and profound sorrow, feeling the weight of the rebellion in their hearts. The perfect peace that had been the very essence of their home was shattered, and the once perfect order now teetered on the brink of utter ruin. Yet amid the swirling chaos and destruction, hope stood for the faith of the loyal angels. Their unwavering love for God shone in every blow they struck and every step they took against Lucifer and his followers. At last, the tide turned. The force of good, rooted in love and truth, began to prevail. Michael raised his sword high for one final, decisive strike. His voice uttered the battle's final words, a declaration of divine authority. By God's power, fall. In that moment, the darkness split asunder. The rebellion, once so fierce and seemingly unstoppable, began to crumble. A great, invisible force swept through the rebel ranks, and the fallen angels were cast out. They were dragged from the heavens like stars plummeting from the sky, their light extinguishing as they fell. Lucifer, the morning star, became Satan, the adversary, and with him, all who had followed his path of ambition were hurled into the abyss. Heaven fell into a solemn, heavy silence. It was a quiet that bore the deep sadness of an irreparable loss. The war had left deep scars, a wound in paradise that only love and time could ever hope to heal. The victorious angels felt the weight of the battle on their souls, but they knew that light had triumphed. Truth, faith, and hope, those virtues that can never truly be defeated, had prevailed. In this tragic victory, heaven remembered an eternal truth. Good always triumphs over evil, not by force or violence, but because goodness is the very essence of God, a light that no darkness can ever extinguish.
After the final, decisive battle, the heavens themselves seemed to recoil, opening up to cast out the rebels. Lucifer, once the glorious morning star, now transformed into Satan, the great adversary, was hurled from the light. Along with his fallen followers, he was dragged down, far from the celestial radiance, into a newly formed abyss of darkness and desolation. The act of expulsion was a cosmic wound. The angels who had been the most beautiful, the most powerful, those whose light had once rivaled the stars, now fell like a rain of banished meteors, their splendor extinguished in their descent. They were cast into the lower world, a place of chaos and shadow. It wasn't a physical place of fire and brimstone, not yet. It was a state of being, an eternal exile where the glory and warmth of God's presence could no longer be seen or felt. For Satan, the weight of this fall was like a burning iron searing his very being. The total, complete separation from God, from the light, from the peace of heaven, was a wound far deeper and more agonizing than any physical punishment could ever inflict. This new realm, the underworld where he was now confined with his followers, was a place of utter spiritual isolation. It was like a shattered mirror, a dark and twisted reflection of the heavenly order, a domain utterly cut off from holiness. For Satan, this expulsion meant the end of his original purpose, the end of his glory. Yet, in the crucible of his pride and unending rage, his hatred did not diminish. It morphed. It transformed into a new, singular mission. If he could not attain God's glory for himself, he would dedicate his entire existence to destroying it wherever he could find it. In this abyss of despair, his burning gaze turned towards creation. He remembered the vision God had shown them, the beautiful material world that God had promised to make, and in his twisted, brilliant mind, a terrible thought took shape. If he could not have heaven, he would corrupt God's most precious new work, humanity. The idea of seeing humans, those fragile beings made in God's own image, dragged down into the same darkness as him, gave him a bitter, chilling satisfaction. In his warped perspective, humans were the ones who had stolen his rightful place. It was because of them, because of God's baffling plan to become one of them, that he had fallen. That love and goodness with which they were to be created would now become the primary target of his eternal hatred. His motivation was crystal clear. If he and his fallen angels could no longer be in God's presence, then humans, these creatures of dust, certainly didn't deserve to be there either. This burning resentment transformed into a cold, calculated mission. He would sabotage the divine work. He would corrupt the purity of creation. He would prove to God that his beloved humans were just as flawed, just as capable of pride and rebellion as he was. The expulsion of Lucifer and his army of fallen angels, now called demons, had a direct and catastrophic consequence on the balance of good and evil. From that moment on, evil began to exist, not just as a concept or an absence of goodness, but as an active, intelligent, and organized force in the cosmos. Led by Satan, the demons began to seek ways to exert their influence over the material world, to whisper temptations into the hearts of humans, to incite the very same pride, envy, and despair that had led to their own downfall. They would become the architects of suffering, the masters of deceit, the princes of this world. Their first target, a perfect garden and 2 innocent souls. Satan's first major act after being cast out was a masterpiece of subtle corruption. His target was the Garden of Eden, the perfect paradise where God, with his infinite love, had set the stage for human history. In this pristine garden, Satan saw his chance to strike at the very heart of God's new creation, to strip the innocence from the first humans, Adam and Eve, and turn them into the first victims of his ongoing rebellion against the Creator. He did not appear as a monstrous dragon or a terrifying figure of darkness. That would have been too obvious, too easy to resist. Instead, he took the form of a serpent, a creature known for its cunning and subtlety, a perfect symbol for his new method of warfare, deception. He approached Eve, not with a command, but with a simple, disarming question designed to plant a seed of suspicion. Did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden"? It was a brilliant opening move. He slightly twisted God's words, making the loving Creator sound like a restrictive tyrant. His technique wasn't overwhelming force, it was a whisper that, like a slow-acting poison, invaded Eve's heart and mind. Satan knew how to transform a simple curiosity into an irresistible desire, how to turn a flicker of doubt into a decisive action. Then came the great lie, the promise that echoed his own downfall. "You will not certainly die," the serpent hissed, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." This was the same temptation that had corrupted him, the promise of being more, of achieving a godlike status, without having to obey the Creator. It was the lure of ultimate independence, the lie that we can be the source of our own light. The promise sealed humanity's fate. Adam and Eve, tempted by the possibility of becoming their own gods, fell, and with them, the entire world fell into the shadow of sin. With a single, whispered temptation, Satan had achieved exactly what he had planned from the abyss, to drive a wedge between creation and its Creator, to bring the celestial conflict down into the human heart. Satan's influence didn't stop there. Throughout history, he has appeared as the adversary who challenges not only ordinary mortals, but also key figures in the story of faith. Consider the testing of Job. In the heavenly court, Satan appears before God again, his arrogance on full display. Does Job fear God for nothing? He sneers. In that moment, he isn't just challenging Job's faithfulness, he's questioning the very nature of goodness and faith itself. He implies that love and loyalty are transactional, a loyalty bought with blessings. His challenge is an affront to God, suggesting that no one, not even the most righteous man, can remain faithful in the face of true suffering. Job's story reveals Satan's core strategy, to inflict pain and despair in order to destroy faith at its very root. And yet, Job's endurance, though filled with anguish and doubt, proves that faith can be a deep-rooted loyalty that persists even when all blessings are gone. But Satan's most audacious move came when he confronted God's ultimate answer to his rebellion, Jesus Christ himself. After 40 days of fasting in the desert, Jesus was at his most vulnerable, and Satan appeared, offering him temptations of power, provision, and glory. "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." Then he took him to the highest point of the temple. "Throw yourself down, and the angels will save you." Finally, the ultimate offer, the one that revealed his deepest desire. He showed Jesus all the kingdoms of the world. "All this I will give you," he said, "if you will bow down and worship me." It was the culmination of his ancient ambition to usurp the worship that belongs to God alone. But Jesus, with unwavering strength, rejected each temptation, quoting scripture and reaffirming the truth. This confrontation wasn't just a test. It was a demonstration that faith, humility, and obedience to God are the ultimate weapons against the most alluring temptations of evil. Satan had failed to corrupt the second Adam, but his war against humanity was far from over. Lucifer's influence hasn't vanished. His presence remains a constant conflict in human life, an echo of that primordial rebellion. Each temptation we face, each moment of doubt, resonates with that first choice in the Garden of Eden and the challenges faced by Job and Jesus. But while his influence is real, his ultimate fate is already written. In the Bible's final book, the Book of Revelation, Satan's ultimate role and his final destiny are unveiled. This incredible book, brimming with striking imagery and powerful prophecies, portrays Satan as the great dragon, the ancient serpent, the ultimate and final foe of humanity and God, determined to corrupt creation until the very end. John, the author of Revelation, describes a vision of the last days, an era when evil seems to reach its zenith, and the final battle between light and darkness intensifies like never before. In this final act, Satan is described as the accuser of our brothers and sisters, constantly trying to lead the faithful astray, sowing doubt and despair. He is the mastermind behind the sinister forces that rise on earth to spread chaos and idolatry. Through them, he seeks to establish a counterfeit kingdom that directly challenges God's authority, a twisted imitation of the divine kingdom. It is his final, desperate attempt to be worshipped as a god, to achieve the glory he has craved since his fall, even if it's through deception and tyranny. John's vision shows Satan facing off against Michael and the heavenly armies one last time. This epic battle is a continuation of the great war that began in heaven, but now the stage is the entire cosmos, and the stakes are the souls of all humanity. But Revelation doesn't end with the battle. It ends with a vision of good's final, absolute triumph over evil. After the Great Tribulation and the last battle, Satan is defeated. Evil's power is dismantled forever. In a symbolism-laden image, the great dragon is captured and hurled into the lake of burning sulfur. This is not just an abyss of separation. It is a state of eternal punishment that renders him powerless to ever again reach humanity or influence creation. This act of ultimate justice seals the inevitable fate of Satan and all his followers, an eternity completely and irrevocably separated from the light and love of God. The fall of Satan in Revelation is the ultimate expression of God's victory. In his infinite love and justice, God allows evil to act for a time, giving humanity the freedom to choose. But at the end of all things, when every choice has been made, evil is finally and decisively vanquished. This final destiny isn't just a punishment for Satan's actions. It is a reaffirmation of God's ultimate power and sovereignty over all creation. In his ultimate downfall, Satan becomes the eternal symbol of a failed rebellion. He is the dimmed light that, in its all-consuming ambition and hatred, could never overcome the love and goodness that give life to all things. The story of Lucifer, from glory to curse, is a profound and tragic tale. It's a warning that even the brightest star can fall into darkness when pride eclipses love. But it is also a story of immense hope. It reminds us that while evil may seem formidable, its time is limited, and its power pales in comparison to God's eternal nature. Good triumphs, not simply through strength, but because it is the very essence of truth, justice, and love. The battle that began in heaven and continues in our own hearts has a guaranteed victor. The final victory belongs to good, and God's light will shine forever. The question that Michael cried out in heaven will always resonate as the ultimate, unshakable truth. Who is like God? The story of Lucifer is more than just an ancient tale. It's a reflection of the conflict that exists within every human heart. The battle between pride and humility, between selfish ambition and selfless love. It's a powerful reminder that our choices, no matter how small they seem, have eternal consequences. It shows us that true strength is found not in elevating ourselves, but in connecting to a source of goodness far greater than we are. What do you think? Does Lucifer's story make you see the nature of evil differently? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this journey into the depths of theology and storytelling resonated with you, consider subscribing and joining our community. We explore the biggest questions of life, faith, and the human condition every week. Thank you for watching.